Welcome to Lyme Time. I'm Allie from the Tick Chicks. We are all more than Lyme disease and chronic illness, and together we stand with you to overcome and rise. I'll bring you closer to the experts in cutting-edge treatments and even a few unexpected ways of healing. I'll ask the questions you want answers to regarding Lyme disease and successful ways of getting you closer to 100%. We are in this together and will not be defined by Lyme. Today on Lyme Time, I am happy to welcome Lauren Less to the show. It's something that I've been working on for a few months just to get this conversation started with Lauren. She is on the Tick Chicks Wealth Advisory team, and I'm just thrilled to have her here. Lauren is a food blogger, therapist, and real estate professional who is passionate about health and wellness and eating delicious food despite having food allergies and dietary restrictions. Using food as medicine has been a large part of her healing journey. She's passionate about sharing her experience that you could still enjoy food despite having limitations. She shares her recipes and health journey in the hopes that it will inspire and assist others going through similar situations. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm just like I said before, I'm just so happy that we're finally getting a chance to catch up and our schedules allowed us to get together. You are a very, very busy person, and we'll get into all your all your food blogs and your therapy and all of that in a little bit. But I wanted to just start out by talking a bit about your childhood, your upbringing, and how you came to have um, a restrictive diet and kind of how that shaped where you are today.
hmm Yeah, so I actually didn't have food allergies until I was 25. Um, I think a lot of people can do this, like kind of look back and be like, oh, these were like the different triggers that led to my immune system blowing up or like having this response or whatever. And so I can kind of, do that too and see that obviously I have a long story, like I'm sure everyone else listening does, but I can, I probably started experiencing symptoms when I was in middle school, and that's like when I know I was bit by a tick. So that was like probably seventh grade, but I just would like be so tired and not be able to go to my sports after school, and I would felt like I was falling asleep at school, and I was having to nap a lot. And at that time I didn't have any food restrictions. I just like was really fatigued, and it was kind of chalked up to like, and some joint pain, which was chalked up to like growing, puberty, all those things. And then in high school, I kind of experienced the same things and then started having some GI issues like senior year of high school, and that was kind of like chalked up to stress, or you're going to college, you're applying to college, nothing's wrong. And I also got mono senior year of high school, and that kind of like exacerbated the fatigue and never really went away. And I think when I went to college I really realized, like, because I was with like my peers 24/7, I realized, wow, I really am like so much more tired than everyone else. Like I can't bounce back like everyone else does. I need way more sleep. I need way more rest. I need way more downtime. And I just kind of thought that's how my body is. Like I must just need more sleep than everyone else. But I definitely, after college, that's when like things started to get a lot worse. And I started having more GI symptoms, and just like feeling like I couldn't function.
That's
So
when you
it
knew
wasn't
something was
really.
really wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of was just like a slow. I mean, I also had like dizziness when I was younger, where which I now know, okay, like I had pot symptoms when I was younger, and I just like didn't know what it was at the time. Or like I was a fast runner and I could like run fast, but like my soccer coaches couldn't understand why I like couldn't keep up the whole game. Like they were like, what's going on? So there were like these little moments of like I did gymnastics too, and like I always was hurting my wrists to the point where like the gymnastics coaches, like I think they didn't believe me at some points. They were like, what? Like Lauren hurt her wrist again. Like she must be lying. But now I know it's like connective tissue issues and stuff like that. So it's like I can look back and like kind of piece things together. But I had a really bad mold exposure at work in 2017, and that's when like everything really just blew up.
Okay, so and that was when you were 25
I
and
think something around there. Would I be 25 then? Yeah, somewhere around there.
somewhere around there. And then so you were exposed to bad mold and then you really went downhill. And tell us about that next part of your journey and how you came out of it.
Yeah, so I was having really bad GI symptoms. And that was ultimately, and like so many other symptoms, but that the GI symptoms were ultimately what led me to being sent to Mayo Clinic. Like, we can't figure out what's wrong with her. And they told me they thought that I had a connective tissue disorder. And then that sent me to a geneticist who diagnosed me with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And then that got me diagnosed with POTS and mast cell activation syndrome. And I still had this thing in the back of my head of like, okay, great. Like I've gotten all these diagnoses and they're telling me they can't do anything to make me better. But I still had it in my head. Like, it's so weird that like this got worse after there was mold at work. And like, I just couldn't get my mind off that. I just was like, my allergies got worse. I didn't have food allergies before. So I would like look up doctors to see if anyone like specialized in mold. And like, I think it was like, people would be like, that's a scam or like whatever. But then I found an integrative doctor because it just like, I just knew in my gut that that had something to do with it. So then I found an integrative doctor and got diagnosed with Lyme and like SIRS and like just, all of the things. And so I can now see like how everything fits together and how like the mold caused a response and just caused my immune system to have all these issues. And I'm sure my gut health was like declining over the years. And I wouldn't say I like ate super unhealthy. I mean, of course, like in college, I drank alcohol, which I'm sure did no favors for my gut health, but I think like the molds just made everything worse.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to so many of so much of what you're saying. I mean, just going from specialist to specialist to specialist. And also, I had the same intuitive nagging feeling as you because I just didn't, I wasn't really convinced 1,000% with what they were telling me. Yes, of course I have fibromyalgia. Of course I have like neuropathy. Of course I have all this stuff, but it wasn't quite making sense because I was just like, you know, 5 months ago going to spinning class every day and living a normal life. So it just kept not feeling exactly right. And I think I share with you when I finally got a Lyme diagnosis, I could kind of really put a label on that and say that must be one of my root causes, and that mold exposure also inflames it. Anytime I'm around mold, in fact, I can smell it a mile away now. I'm so sensitive to the mold. So we have a lot of similarities. And then, so I'm assuming that once you got a proper diagnosis and was able to understand some root causes, then you began really, really restricting your diet. And I'm assuming that's with a doctor's, did your doctor suggest you go ahead and modify your diet?
So I was diagnosed with like multiple IgE food allergies, which I think were a result of just like gut health, immune health, like everything tied to. I mean, there's more and more research connecting like the gut microbiome to food allergies and things like that. Like obviously, I can't say definitively, but like it makes a lot of sense because it's kind of rare to develop food allergy, or it's more rare to just like randomly develop food allergies as an adult. Like so. To me, it like made sense that there was like some triggering event that like just totally disrupted my gut and my immune system and everything else. Obviously, I can't say for sure, but at that time, I cut out all of the IgE food allergies, and it did make me feel a little bit better.
Can
But
you
then
explain to everybody what the IG food allergy, what that
yeah,
was?
so like an IgE food allergy is like an immune mediated food allergy response. It's like what you think of typically with like anaphylaxis. Although anaphylaxis isn't always necessarily like what you see in the movies of like your throat closes. It could be two body systems. And that's kind of an overlap with MCAS too, is like some people will have anaphylaxis with MCAS that isn't necessarily an IgE mediated food allergy either. So it's really, I think it's hard sometimes to piece apart like what is what. But I think like a food sensitivity, people usually think of like, their stomach hurts or their GI tract is affected, something like that. Whereas food allergies can be like is more of an immune mediated response that can impact like several different body systems. Although like sensitivities can also cause like brain fog and stuff like that. So I don't want to like diminish that either. Like I think people can have severe like neurological issues if they have like a gluten sensitivity. So
Yeah, and this can be, this can really add up over time. If you're sick and not feeling well and you're taking the medicine, but you're not really addressing the gut, and the medicine can also disrupt the gut microbiome. So, without really addressing the food and the intake of what you're putting into your body, you're missing an entire piece of the puzzle. And I often get the question, what's the first thing you do when you feel like something's being triggered, whether it's Lyme or EBV or anything. And I always say I restrict my food immediately. And that is one of the fastest ways I can get on top of my symptoms. I'm not saying it's going to take everything away, but that is a surefire way for me to really get ahead of it and then begin to help my body in other ways.
yeah.
Um, and I want to talk a little bit about what it means to people mentally, people's mental health when they're told by a doctor or a professional that they have to restrict their diet, that some of their favorite foods may never be introduced into their lives again. You know, for me, I'm a girl from the Midwest. I grew up eating in that Midwestern way. And it took me years in full transparency, really, to fully come over to the other side and realize, hey, I'm not going to be restricted or anything like that. But during that time, I kept saying, oh, I'll eat healthy Monday through Friday. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I can kind of cheat a little bit and da da da. I was playing all these games. So, and I think that it affects other people that have probably gotten a stronger diagnosis or have multiple diagnoses at the same time in a much more profound way. So, can you just talk a little bit about a person's mental health when they're going through something like food restrictions?
Yeah, I think it's really hard. It's really hard. It's really hard when you're diagnosed with a food allergy. It's really hard when you're told to eat a restrictive diet. I think it's definitely there's definitely like a fine line too where people can dip into an eating disorder, and I think that's why like all the restrictive diets that are done like really need to be monitored by a dietitian, a nutritionist, a doctor like very closely. And like personally, I mean, aside from like IgE food allergies, I don't think a restrictive diet should be positioned to, a patient as like, you have to do this forever. Cause that's not what I believe. I believe that like, if we're able to get our bodies back to feeling good and feeling healthy, like that's the goal, that we should be able to eat whatever we want, like within reason. Like when I say food, I mean like real food. So I think that's important too.
Yeah. I mean, it can make a person feel like that's their final feeling of control in their life and everything else is being stripped away. And then all of a sudden the doctor lays that on you like, okay, stop the sugar, stop the red meat, stop the dairy, stop, all the alcohol and the caffeine and all of that. It's a lot. and it's really hard to make those adjustments. What is your take on fasting for not obviously not for calorie control, but for symptom control?
So, I mean, I've read a lot about how fasting can like negatively impact women's hormones specifically. So I don't do it personally. I think for me, like there is something to be said about like, you don't eat too close to bedtime. So you give your body a break, like to be doing what it needs to at night instead of digesting your food. And to me, that makes sense. Like I have an aura ring. If I eat too close to bed, it'll tell me like you ate too close to bed, your sleep score is not good, your HRV is lower. Like, and I notice that. So I notice that I feel the best when I eat an early dinner and then like, but I do eat within an hour of waking just because it makes me feel my best and I need like protein right in the morning. And I notice like my blood sugar is not doing what it's supposed to be if I fast. And I think that caused an issue for me before because I had such bad GI symptoms that I wouldn't eat till like noon because my stomach hurt. And then I was just throwing my blood sugar all over the place. And like my POTS symptoms will get worse if I don't eat. So that's been my experience with it. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people have different opinions and different experiences, but I've found that like there is something to be said about like giving your body a break to just like sleep and do the functions it needs to do while you're sleeping though.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, each body is different, and the way that we're dealing with our own inflammation in our bodies is very different. So everybody listening should just take that into mind. I personally, like you, I do much better just if I'm going to eat anything in the morning, I will have to eat protein. And I've just really cut out all the other typical what we think of as breakfast items, cut them all out. And,
I
even if it's just like if I had made a grilled chicken the night before and have some left over, I always try to actually have some left over. And I just cut it into strips and I'll have a little bit of that, maybe a little bit of avocado, and I'm pretty much good to go. But that protein is just such a good start for me as opposed to starting out with anything else. Um, let's talk a little bit about you're a food blogger. The foods that you create online and on social media are just, they look delicious, and nobody can watch what you do and say, "Oh my gosh, I could never eat that. That's not going to be for me." I mean, you really pick wisely and you make it look so easy, and you just show us that eating healthy can be beautiful and delicious and an enjoyable experience. So what are some of your favorite food swaps that you use in your recipes?
yeah let me think. I will use like here's the thing is like on a normal day-to-day basis I don't feel like I need to use swaps because I'm mostly focusing on whole foods. So like I mean, I'll have like rice or potatoes or something, whereas like maybe before I would have had bread, like I'm having a carb. Um, but I've just noticed that I feel better when I'm not swapping like cheese for like processed vegan cheese. And like, of course, I have that, but and I say this too, like a lot of my fun creative recipes are like I try to eat like 90-10. And a lot of my recipes are the 10 because they're like the things that people want to bring to their barbecue or their, Christmas party or their whatever it is, baby shower, birthday party, like so that they feel included and they have a fun food. And yeah, of course, I have like dinner recipes and stuff like that. And I send out an email list with those. But when it comes to swaps, um, I'm not eating a lot of that on a day to day basis, but I do have, I love like simple meals, like for swaps for like crackers or cookies. Um, I think like there are a lot of chips that are made with like avocado oil instead of like sunflower oil or canola oil, like Siete or what is that brand?
I love the Siete brand, by the way. I'm
Yeah,
obsessed with it right
me
now.
too.
And also just being able to finally, I mean, I don't, you're still young, God bless you, but it wasn't that long ago that you could not find gluten-free flour. And
Yeah,
when you did find it, it was not great. It was not a great substitute, but now there's just so much on the market.
yeah, that's true. There are a lot of alternatives now. And I'll use like almond flour or coconut flour in my like baking. Um,
What about sugars? Do you swap out sugars for cane sugar?
yeah, I will use like coconut sugar, or like honey, maple syrup. Um, I know there's date sugar too. I don't think I've used it like specifically, but I know like some of the chocolate chip brands I've used have had date sugar.
That's
So
pretty great.
those are all good stuff.
Tell me if I know that I'm pretty sure that you counsel people on the side. You're a therapist, but I'm wondering if that's diet related or just in general. What does your therapy practice look like?
Yeah, so well, I'm not practicing right now. So like at the end of last year, I was doing my food blog. I was working part-time as a therapist, and then I was doing real estate, and I was like, this is too much. And I'm like, still, you have a full-time job of your health stuff too. So I'm like, I have too many jobs, and I had to cut something. So I cut the therapy. Um, because I was like I was working at a private practice, and I was I was at the point where I was like, I'm either gonna go off on my own and start my own therapy practice, or I'm gonna keep going with this food blog and like see if I can make this a thing. And so that's what I decided to do. And it's interesting because therapy is like working with people individually, and of course I felt like I was making a huge impact on their lives, but I also felt like with my page I was reaching more people, obviously in a different way. But at that point, I just felt like that was the direction that I wanted to go. And I was just connecting with more people and reaching more people, and, um, getting messages from people that they loved my recipes and it was helping them with their endometriosis diet or PCOS or like whatever their doctor was telling them to do. So
Yeah,
yeah. And
I really love that philosophy that, that you're helping a lot of people with a lot of chronic issues. And it's not necessarily Lyme specific, but it's a lot. It's a lot of specifics like anti-inflammatory, I'm sure allergen free, gluten free. I don't know if you use dairy or not, but like you said, it's just for those times that you want to make something yummy and delicious, but you want to keep it real and doctor approved and doctor friendly.
right.
What are some common misconceptions about a clean diet? What do you find trips people up the most?
Um, Well, I think people think it's really boring and that I cannot eat anything. Like every time I even just like the gluten and dairy is like just like the surface level of what I don't eat, or like, and people are like, what do you eat? Like that's in everything. Like you must eat nothing. You must eat ice. Like whatever. It must be so boring. And that's why one of the posts on my Instagram that went viral was like one of the ones where I was like, you can't eat gluten free and dairy free. Like, what do you eat? Ice. And then like I just put all the photos of like my food flashing. So that's definitely a misconception. And I think also I'll just like get comments that, well, I think there are two different ways of eating gluten free and dairy free though too. Like you can eat gluten free and dairy free, and there are tons of accounts that where people just eat processed food all day that like don't have the best ingredients. So there's like definitely a difference and a misconception around eating gluten free and dairy free, like versus eating like actually a cleaner, healthier diet. Like you could eat processed gluten free and dairy free food all day that has not so great ingredients, and you would probably be so inflamed. So I think that's another misconception, is that if you're eating gluten free and dairy free, you must be so healthy. And it's really about, how you're doing it too.
I agree. I agree. I thought in my mind, well, first of all, I thought, okay, well, I'll just go vegetarian. Well, vegetarian diet is sometimes laden with all of these carbs, and that really took me into a downward spiral. This was early on in my
A
journey
lot of
when
us did that.
I thought that was clean eating, is cutting out the meat.
Yeah.
Okay. So I went through that phase and I was worse off than I was before. And then I went on a salad craze because I was thinking, well, veggies, you're not going to have many symptoms from that. Well, actually, carrots and lemons were even throwing me off. And any kind of, even if it was a gluten-free dressing, like these salad dressings, and then the extras they put in the salads, and then you've got the, you might have a grain in there or whatever. And I just, again, it's something that I thought was going to be really, really wonderful. And it took me off in a different direction. I rarely eat salads anymore for lunch. I really have to stick to a lot of protein and a high protein diet. A lot of people don't understand that just eating protein, an egg or two in the morning is not what I consider a high protein breakfast.
Yeah.
And especially when you get to my age and you're realizing that you need so much more protein. You basically need the amount of protein that you would find in an entire chicken breast at a meal.
Mhm.
And that's hard for me to eat, that much protein, but I get around it in different ways. And there's all sorts of really, really good, high protein cottage cheese and yogurt now with added proteins and things. So that's really wonderful. I wondered if we could talk a little bit about, with Lyme disease, and you talked about with your mono early on and going through high school and college, you would have these periods of pure exhaustion. And I don't think anybody understands exhaustion like a Lyme patient understands exhaustion. It is like clinical, debilitating fatigue where you
Yeah.
can barely get out of bed. And when I was that way, that's sometimes when the bad eating would occur because I didn't have the energy to get to the store. I would look in my refrigerator, there would be nothing fresh.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. So I started, having a meal delivered from Uber Eats, or I would just out of desperation, my husband would come home and I was just like, I don't know, let's just order a pizza. Or, it was kind of a survival mode at that point.
Mhm.
Give us some tips on how to be prepared for those bad days or those bad weeks and organized.
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do is like on a day when you have a little bit more energy is trying to like prep yourself some food for and put it in your freezer. And that's usually what I try to do. Or like if I make a soup or something like that, I'll try to make a double batch and like put the rest of it in the freezer. Um, Also like my go-to meals are like throwing like ground chicken and like frozen veggies that are already cut into a pan and like just cooking that and like putting a sauce on it like pesto or something like that. You can also get like frozen rice and just like put it all in the pan and just make it, and that's like one of my go-to dinners. Because honestly, like by the time my day is over, I'm like I still have like fatigue is like my worst symptom still. And by the time it gets to dinner, I'm like, okay. And I will make like sheet pan meals, just like put a couple chicken breasts and like vegetables, um, or potatoes like on a sheet pan. And just try to do like as little work as possible.
Yeah, I sometimes slow cooker is really good for me. Just kind of just throwing in a bunch of things and cooking all day. That wonderful meat, and it can really be an easy choice rather than cooking. And also, I think just kind of stocking your pantry. That really helped me a lot. So, in other words, instead of reaching for pasta because it's in there, if I'm ahead of the game and stock up on things like, um, palm, whatever it's called, palm, hearts of palm pasta. They have that in cans now. There's um, like I really realized how important eating things with minerals are as well as that. So like even some of the inari or the sushi sheets that you have and just putting some rice and veggies in there and throwing that together. Um, yeah, and now whenever I have a roasted chicken from the grocery store, I'll just put the carcass in a pot of boiling water and make my own chicken broth and keep that in the freezer. That's always a good one. And sometimes I'll even just sip on that for a meal, and that brings me a lot of satisfaction and not a lot of side effects. Um, so tell me a little bit about some upcoming projects that you have going on and yeah, what's going on with you right now?
Yeah. Let's see. I just released an ebook on like eating gluten-free and dairy-free. So like basically just a beginner's guide to how to eat gluten-free and dairy-free, whether, you developed food allergies or you were told by your doctor that you have to eat gluten-free and dairy-free. Kind of just taking people through the process of doing that. And then it has like all my favorite like gluten-free and dairy-free swaps, like everything I've swapped from like milk to yogurt to cereal to just pretty much everything, a swap for all of those things. And like how I eat out at restaurants, how I manage traveling, how I meal prep, just like different sections for all of those things. And then let's see, this past weekend I spoke at a food allergy conference, which was really cool. And then I am working on basically just like holiday recipes, holiday guides. Holiday season is pretty busy, so I like to do a lot of projects, and I'm trying to tell myself to just stick to my regular work because I am kind of like having a little bit of some kind of a flare up since I got COVID in February. Thing like I'm just like more inflamed. My gut is a little bit off. Like so kind of trying to dig into what's going on with that and like just trying to do my like regular work and not add anything else to my plate right now because I tend to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I often say that a lot of people that get Lyme disease and other inflammatory chronic illness are type A personalities, and it's another thing that, in addition to eating a clean diet, it's another thing to recognize that inner, battery in you that just doesn't turn off, and how fulfilling it once was to do all the things. But then after a while, if you're really sick and ongoing or having a flare, it doesn't bring any joy into your life at all. In fact, it makes it more complicated. So the really tuning in to, hey, let's just take a couple things off my plate and refocus and do the things that you love to do and make yourself healthy again, and then you'll be back. But maybe you won't. Maybe you'll do what I do, and I'm not going to be a type A personality anymore. I mean, I just have realized that my own joy is from experiences in my life with the people I love and keeping a healthy-ish household as healthy as I can with three growing kids and everything that they want to do and eat. But it's every little bit helps. And can you tell the people listening out there are feeling, they are really living where you were a few years ago, and they're sometimes in bed and sometimes struggling with food altogether, especially if they do have any past of an eating disorder, and they're really searching for answers. Do you have any kind of final words to our listeners out there?
Yeah, I think first of all, like it can always get better, and that's what I really like needed to know too. And I think something that has been so helpful for me throughout this journey is like finding people, whether it's like on social media or people you connect with or whoever it is that like have been through what you are going through and have or like are starting to come out on the other side, because it tells your brain like that's possible. Like when I was, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but when I was diagnosed with EDS, doctors told me like you'll never work out again in the same way, you'll never be able to lift weights, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you're like so fragile, you're going to break, like that kind of a thing. And so I stopped and I got so weak and I felt horrible. And then I like found these people on social media who have this program, and this guy's like muscular and like lifting weights, and the girl the same thing, like they're both in great shape and they both have EDS and connective tissue issues. And like I was like, okay, they did it, like I can do it. Like I'm not, it just like it's changing your mindset and changing your brain. And I think mindset like has been a huge part of this for me in general. Once you change your mindset to like from I'm sick, I'm always going to be sick. And it's really hard because that's what doctors will tell you sometimes. It's like you're always going to be sick. You're going to live with this forever. It's chronic. You're probably always going to have this. You're never going to get to 100%. Like those are always things. Those are all things that I heard, and I think your brain has to know that it's possible. And just making a tiny change, whatever change you can, wherever you're at. If you are bedbound, like you can start with like 5 minutes of meditation, or a walk around your driveway, like whatever it is, wherever you have to start, there's always a step you can take. And I think that's what gives me hope too in my journey of like trying to get to 100% is with health. There's so many things, like there is always something else that I can try, that I'm like so confident that I'm going to get to 100%. I'm going to cry.
You're going to make me cry. I know that, it does feel hopeless at times, but there's a way to just, if you can just be your own cheerleader. And that's the hardest part is actually, continuing that conversation, that inner dialogue of hope and health. And you will get there. You will get there. Take it from us. You'll get there. Okay, tell everybody listening where they can find you and your yummy recipes and all that good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me at Less with Laura on Instagram, TikTok. My blog is lesswithlaura.com. And I also send out a weekly email list on Substack that has like recipe inspiration for the week. So you can also sign up for that.
Well, that's wonderful. I need to do that. And Less with Laura is LessWithlaur.com. And because her last name is Les and her first name is Lauren, which I think is so cute. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah,
I know we'll be talking a little bit more in the future and would always welcome you coming back at any time.
yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Lyme Time Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe on your favorite platform to be notified of new episodes. Remember, this is not intended to be medical advice. Take your findings to your provider to see if something is right for you. No two bodies heal the same, and your doctor knows you and your labs best. You can find out more about the Tick Chicks at thetickchicks.com, and if you subscribe there, you'll be notified of upcoming events like the in-person Losing Lyme retreat that I host. I also have shopping pages dedicated to helping your at-home symptom relief, as well as a private support group. Join the Tick Chicks tribe on Instagram, YouTube, Meta, TikTok, Pinterest, and X. You are not alone.